Police officers unleash K9 dogs on an innocent black woman, little knowing she possesses a skill that would completely alter the course of their violent encounter. What was meant to be just another case of police brutality transforms into a story of resistance, as the officers discover far too late that their victim is a professional animal trainer. The night sky suddenly tore in two, and thunder echoed between the low-slung buildings of the neighborhood on the city's edge. Ana Costa clutched her newborn son to her chest, pulling the thin blanket tighter around him. Every drop of rain that struck her shoulders felt like a warning, an omen that her intuition, honed by years of military training, could not ignore. The baby remained surprisingly calm, as if he understood the need for silence. The former soldier walked with firm, calculated steps. There was no desperation in her movements, only resolve. A police siren wailed in the distance, and the characteristic crackle of a radio cut through the silence of the rainy night. Ana didn't run, didn't plead. She simply held her course, her eyes scanning every shadow, every movement around her. As she reached the intersection in front of the central square, the black woman felt the air shift before she even saw the patrol cars. The unmistakable sound of K9s barking furiously made her heart pound. Not with fear, but with a contained rage she had learned to manage during her years of service. She recognized those barks. She knew their cadence, their timbre, the meaning behind them. Pedro Silva nervously adjusted his rain-soaked uniform. The officer held the leashes of two trained German shepherds, which strained against them, sniffing the damp air with growing excitement. He had received clear orders over the radio. Suspect on the run, possibly armed, intercept at all costs. No one had mentioned a baby. No one had mentioned a mother. "Police, stop!" the officer shouted, his voice betraying an insecurity he tried to mask with authority. Ana remained motionless, her eyes fixed on the snarling animals. She showed no fear, made no attempt to negotiate. The baby began to stir restlessly in her arms, as if sensing the rising tension. "Last chance," Pedro yelled again, as the other officers took their positions, weapons drawn. It was then that his superior gave the nod. The young officer, believing he was simply doing his duty, released the leashes. The dogs charged toward the woman and her child as the rain fell mercilessly on them all. Pedro Silva had no idea who truly stood before him. A woman who knew these animals better than anyone present. A handler who had trained dozens just like them. Ana took a deep breath, adjusted the baby in one arm, and with the other, prepared for the inevitable encounter with the rapidly approaching dogs. The dogs lunged toward Ana Costa, their bodies tense, their fangs bared. The fine rain blurred everyone's vision, but not hers. As onlookers held their breath and the officers awaited the inevitable attack, something unexpected happened. The former soldier's gaze transformed completely. There was no fear, only an absolute focus that seemed to come from another world. With her baby held securely against her chest, Ana lowered her body slightly and began to whisper words in Iwe, an African language no one else in that small town understood. The sounds escaped her lips like an ancient melody, almost inaudible beneath the drumming of rain on the asphalt. The three German shepherds from the K9 squad stopped abruptly, less than 2 meters away from her. Their ears perked up, attentive. The largest one, leading the pack, tilted its head in confusion. It sniffed the air once, twice, as if trying to decipher a secret code only its instincts could recognize. "What's happening?" one of the officers yelled, as Pedro Silva stared at the scene, wide-eyed, his hand trembling over his holster. Ana continued to whisper, her gaze locked on the animals. In a gesture that stunned everyone, the lead dog took a step back, then another. The other two followed its example. Then, against all expectations and years of police training, the three dogs sat down, quiet and alert, as if awaiting new instructions. In a second-floor window of the building across the street, 15-year-old Mateus was recording everything on his phone. His hands trembled, but the image was clear enough. A black woman with a baby, facing down three police dogs that now seemed tamed by incomprehensible words. "This is impossible," Pedro muttered, taking a few steps forward. The dogs turned toward him, growling low, as if they now considered him the real threat. Ana remained still, shielding her son, while the officers tried and failed to regain control of their animals. The crowd that had formed began to pull out their own phones, capturing the extraordinary moment. "Arrest that woman!" the supervisor ordered over the radio, but no one moved. The standoff lasted only a few minutes, but for everyone present, it felt like an eternity. Mateus's video was the first to hit social media. In less than an hour, it had thousands of shares. The caption was simple: "Black woman with baby tames police dogs with magic words." The story of Ana Costa was beginning to spread across the country, far beyond the limits of that small town. Dona Lucia Oliveira pressed her wrinkled fingers against the faded cotton curtain, feeling every frantic beat of her heart. Through the window, the scene looked unreal. Ana Costa, with her son in her arms, surrounded by dogs that had inexplicably calmed before her. The old woman held her breath. It wasn't the first time she had witnessed the quiet strength of that woman. 6 years ago, when the river flooded and swamped the low-lying houses of the neighborhood, it was Ana who had emerged like a shadow in the stormy night. Sophia, her 5-year-old granddaughter, had been trapped on the second floor of their flooded home. Without fanfare, without seeking recognition, Ana had swum against the current and carried the little girl to safety in her arms, disappearing afterward, refusing any thanks or praise. "It's her," Lucia murmured to herself, as she watched the patrol cars form a threatening semicircle around the young mother. Officer Pedro Silva was gesturing, visibly confused by the animal's reaction. Other officers approached cautiously, hands on their weapons, as if Ana were some kind of menace, not a woman protecting her newborn baby. That's when something inside Dona Lucia broke. Decades of forced silence, of bowing her head, of swallowing injustice. She remembered her youth, the marches, the raised signs, the voices forcibly silenced. She remembered her own mother, who had served in wealthy homes for 40 years without ever receiving a look of respect. With trembling hands, the old woman threw the window wide open. "Leave that woman alone!" Her voice came out stronger than she expected, filled with an authority she didn't know she still possessed. "Have you no shame? A mother with a child in her arms." The officers turned, surprised by the interruption. Ana looked up, recognizing her neighbor's voice. For a brief moment, their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. "Ma'am, go back inside," one of the officers ordered. "I will not." Lucia's lips tightened, the bitter taste of past injustices on her tongue. "I'm tired of watching this happen. This woman saved my granddaughter when no one else would." Neighbors began to open their windows. Some appeared at their doorways. The confrontation now had witnesses, and Lucia knew the power of that. As the dogs remained inexplicably seated at Ana's feet, The old woman felt that something bigger was beginning here. An old wound being reopened so it could finally have a chance to heal properly. Captain Mariana Santos held her breath as she watched the video for the third time. Her phone trembled slightly in her fingers as the image showed Ana Costa facing the dogs with a posture she knew all too well. The device's small screen did nothing to diminish the impact of the scene now going viral on social media. "My God, it's really her," she murmured to herself, her stomach churning. 6 years had passed since they had trained together in the army. Mariana still remembered the first day she saw the young recruit, commanding the animals with an almost supernatural skill. Ana had been her best student, the only one who truly understood the language of dogs beyond basic commands. Now that same woman was facing animals that she herself might have helped train. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Colonel Mendez. "Santos, I want a full report on this incident in 1 hour. We need to understand how that woman controlled our dogs." The captain hung up and ran her hands over her face. What was she supposed to do? To reveal that Ana Costa had been part of the elite K9 training team would mean exposing flaws in the system, questioning why a qualified veteran was being treated like a common criminal. It would also mean admitting she knew Ana personally. Sitting at her computer, Mariana began to draft the official report. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard. Every word she typed seemed to weigh a ton. In the end, she chose omission. She described the incident as anomalous animal behavior under unforeseen circumstances, without mentioning Ana's military past or her specialization. She sent the document and immediately felt the weight of the lie settle in her chest. She, who had always prided herself on integrity, was now hiding crucial information. Why? To protect the institution? To protect herself? Or was it one last act of loyalty to the woman she had once admired? In the hallway, two officers were commenting on the video, laughing about the situation as if it were just a curiosity, not a real person facing an injustice. That woman has more courage than many of us in here, Mariana thought, feeling ashamed of her own cowardice as she signed the false report. The captain opened a drawer and found an old photograph. She and Ana, side by side, after a successful operation. Both were smiling with the pride of people who believed they were making a difference. When had Mariana lost that conviction? When had she become just another cog in the machine? The weight of her omission began to eat at her conscience, while the video continued to circulate, exposing a truth her report was trying to hide. Pedro Silva couldn't sleep. Sitting in the dark living room of his apartment, the officer re-watched the video the teenager had filmed in the square for the 20th time. The shaky footage clearly showed the moment Ana Costa faced the dogs without a hint of fear. Something about the scene bothered him deeply. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered to himself, watching how the animals hesitated as they approached the woman. It wasn't normal. In his 5 years with the K9 unit, Pedro had never seen the dogs disobey a direct command like that. It was as if they recognized Ana, as if she held some kind of authority over them. The next morning, with dark circles under his eyes, the officer arrived at the station early. Guilt had been consuming him since the incident. He had followed orders, yes, but now he questioned whether those orders were just. A mother with a newborn in her arms posed no threat. Taking advantage of the quiet morning shift, Pedro accessed the internal archive system. He typed in the woman's full name and waited. Nothing. He tried again, this time including K9 training in the search. The computer processed for a few seconds until an old folder appeared on the screen. My God, he whispered, a sinking feeling in his stomach. The documents revealed that Ana had been part of a special military K9 training program. Not only that, she had been responsible for the initial training of the very same dogs that were now part of the police K9 unit, including the ones unleashed on her in the square. Pedro ran a hand over his face, feeling nauseous. The photos showed a younger Ana, in uniform, next to the puppies that were now trained police dogs. In one picture, she was smiling alongside Captain Mariana Santos, her superior at the time. The officer quickly closed the files as he heard footsteps approaching. His heart hammered against his ribs as he stared at the blank screen. The revelation put him in an impossible position. His loyalty to the uniform demanded silence, but his conscience screamed for justice. For the rest of his shift, Pedro watched the dogs in the kennel with new eyes, especially Alpha, the lead dog, who seemed restless since the incident. Now he understood why. The animals hadn't been disobeying. They had been recognizing their true trainer. At the end of the day, sitting in his patrol car, Pedro made a decision. He couldn't continue to be complicit in this injustice. Ana Costa deserved respect, not persecution, and he would do whatever it took to right this wrong, even if it meant confronting the entire system. Night fell heavy on the neighborhood, bringing with it an almost oppressive silence. Ana Costa had finally managed to get her son to sleep after hours of crying, as if the little one could feel the tension that hung over them. The modest apartment, lit only by the faint glow of a lamp, felt like a fragile refuge from the world outside. It was around 2 in the morning when the first scratch sounded at the door. Subtle, almost imperceptible. Ana woke with a start, years of military training having made her a feather-light sleeper. The second scratch was louder, followed by a low whine she would recognize anywhere. "Alpha," she whispered, her heart beginning to race. With silent steps, she approached the door, glancing through the side window before turning the knob. And there she was. The German shepherd, the lead K9 officer, the very same animal ordered to attack her just hours before. The dog looked at Ana with intelligent amber eyes, its ears erect and alert. "How did you find me?" Ana whispered, her voice barely a breath as she crouched to the dog's level. Alpha entered cautiously, sniffing the air. Ana closed the door gently, aware that harboring a fugitive police dog could make her situation infinitely worse. But something in this reunion transcended laws and uniforms. It was a recognition between two warriors. The former soldier extended a trembling hand, touching the familiar black and gold fur. How many nights had they spent together in distant trenches? How many times had they saved each other's lives? "Ojumi, hello, my friend," Ana whispered in Iwe, the language of their secret training sessions. Words that carried more than commands. They carried history. In the corner of the room, the baby stirred in a makeshift bassinet. Alpha's head snapped in that direction, her nose testing the air. Ana tensed for a second, maternal instinct flaring, but she relaxed as she saw the protective stance the dog assumed. "You came to protect us both, didn't you?" she murmured, feeling tears well in her eyes for the first time since the incident. The dog padded to the bassinet, gently sniffing the sleeping infant before lying down beside it, an ancestral guardian. Ana watched the scene, remembering the silent oaths made on battlefields, promises of protection that transcended species and continents. Sitting on the cold floor, her back against the wall, Ana watched over the sleep of her son and his new protector. Two innocent lives, bound by fate to a woman who carried the invisible scars of wars her country preferred to forget. That night, in her small apartment, an unlikely family was formed, forged by bonds stronger than blood. The next morning, the news spread like wildfire. Ana Costa was handcuffed at her own front door, charged with obstruction of authority. Cold words that failed to capture the complexity of what had truly happened. Two uniformed officers escorted her to the patrol car as she tried to maintain her composure. Her newborn son clutched to her chest, as if she could shield him from the world with that single embrace. "Leave her alone! She's done nothing wrong!" Donna Lucia shouted from the sidewalk, her elderly body trembling with indignation. Other neighbors joined the protest, forming a small, divided crowd. On one side, familiar faces raised their voices in the ex-soldier's defense. On the other, there were disapproving glances and malicious whispers about people who don't respect authority getting what they deserve. An officer plucked the baby from Anna's arms with a bureaucratic coldness that made the crowd gasp. The mother offered no physical resistance. She knew any sudden move would be used against her. But for an instant, her eyes betrayed the primal terror of a mother separated from her young. "My son stays with Donna Lucia," Anna declared, her voice firm despite the cuffs biting into her wrists. "No one else." The officer hesitated, but handed the child to the old woman, who pushed her way through the crowd with determination. Inside the police van, the cold metal pressed against her back. Anna was finally alone with her thoughts. She kept her posture erect, her gaze fixed forward, just as she had in her military training days. She would not give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her break, but behind that facade of strength, a corrosive fear began to spread. What if she lost custody of her son? What if the system that had already marginalized her for being a black woman now branded her an unfit mother? The vehicle swayed on the pitted streets of the periphery. Through the grate, Anna watched the same sidewalks she had walked so many times, now the setting of her public humiliation. A single tear threatened to escape, but she suppressed it with the strength of a war-zone survivor. "They don't know who I am," she thought, as the van sped toward the station. "But they will." The former K9 trainer closed her eyes and began to silently plan every step of her resistance. Not for revenge, but for the right to raise her son in peace, far from the very system that was now swallowing her whole. The scent of hibiscus tea filled the small kitchen as Donna Lucia Oliveira prepared an old recipe with practiced hands. Anna's baby slept peacefully in a makeshift crib, a basket lined with soft sheets. The old woman added a spoonful of cornmeal to the mixture, stirring slowly as she whispered words her own grandmother had taught her decades ago. "This ritual has protected my family for generations," she explained to the infant, as if he could understand. "Your mother will be back, I promise." Sitting down in her rocking chair, Lucia took the boy into her arms. His weight was familiar, reminding her of her granddaughter, Sophia, as a baby. The memory brought more painful ones to the surface, of her youth, when she had lost her youngest son to police violence. Back then, she had swallowed her tears, accepted the official excuses, and allowed the injustice to be swept under the rug. "Not this time," she murmured, stroking the sleeping face. "Your mother is stronger than I ever was, and she won't be alone in this fight." The phone rang. It was her granddaughter, asking if she needed anything. The retired woman smiled, realizing how solidarity was quietly growing throughout the neighborhood. People were leaving groceries at the door, offering help, sharing in the indignation. At the police station, the atmosphere was different. Captain Mariana Santos slammed the door to the interrogation room, staring at Pedro Silva with accusing eyes. "What is this about an incomplete report? Are you trying to undermine me?" The officer didn't flinch. Something inside him had shifted since the incident in the square. He pulled his phone from his pocket and showed his superior the images he had found in the archives. Ana Costa trained these very dogs 3 years ago. You knew that, didn't you, Captain? She was your protégé in the army. Mariana paled but maintained her rigid posture. That's confidential. You weren't authorized to access those files. And you had no right to withhold that information, Pedro countered, his voice steady. That woman was wronged. The dogs recognized her. That's why they didn't attack. This needs to be in the official report. The captain ran a hand through her hair, torn between institutional loyalty and a guilty conscience. She remembered Ana from her training days, disciplined, brilliant, able to command the most ferocious animals with a soft word. If this comes out, the entire K9 department will be questioned, she argued, more to herself than to Pedro. And maybe it needs to be, he replied, pocketing his phone. The truth will come out, Captain, with or without your help. I'd rather be on the right side of this when it does. Leaving the captain to her dilemma, Pedro walked out, his resolve set. Meanwhile, in Dona Lucia's house, the baby slept on, protected by the aroma of tea and the silent promise of justice. The video of the confrontation between Ana Costa and the police dogs hit over 2 million views in just 48 hours. Rafael Almeida, an investigative journalist for Sao Paulo's largest newspaper, watched the footage more than 20 times before deciding to drive out to the small town. Something about the black woman facing down the animals with such calm authority intrigued him deeply. Upon arriving, Rafael checked into a modest guest house and began his fieldwork. With his smartphone always at the ready, the reporter spent the day interviewing local residents. Dona Lucia was one of the first to receive him, serving him coffee as she recounted Ana's history in the community. That girl saved my granddaughter during the flood 5 years ago. She waded into the water without a second thought, the old woman said, wiping away a stubborn tear. At the police station, the journalist met with resistance. No one wanted to talk about the incident, but Rafael was persistent. After hours of pushing, he gained partial access to incident reports involving the K9 unit. What he found was staggering. In the last 3 years, 17 incidents involving disproportionate use of force with police dogs against black civilians, he wrote in his notebook. In none of the cases were the officers disciplined. His investigation led him to the municipal archive. There, sifting through dusty documents, Rafael made a surprising discovery. A nearly forgotten law, passed 15 years earlier, that expressly prohibited the use of police dogs against pregnant women and mothers with infants. The law was proposed after a similar incident back in 2008, the archivist explained, adjusting her glasses. But I've never heard anyone mention it since. As night fell, Rafael finished his report on his laptop. The article, accompanied by photos and testimonies, was published on the newspaper's website and shared thousands of times within hours. Outraged comments multiplied, demanding justice for Ana. The next day, the story reached Captain Mariana Santos. She read every word, her stomach churning, recognizing the gravity of the situation. The report specifically mentioned the forgotten law and questioned why Officer Silva had released the dogs on a mother with a baby. Local authorities, pressured by the national outcry, scheduled a press conference for late afternoon. Raphael knew his work was just beginning. As he walked through the town streets, he noticed people watching him, some with gratitude, others with suspicion. The truth was unsettling, but it was his duty to bring it to light. Ana Costa kept her back straight in the metal chair of the interrogation room. The fluorescent light highlighted the dark circles under her eyes, formed after sleepless nights separated from her son. Two social workers faced her from across the table, clipboards in hand, their expressions a mixture of suspicion and pity. Do you have the psychological stability to raise a child, considering your military background? The older one asked, adjusting her glasses disdainfully. Ana took a deep breath. My military background taught me discipline and resilience, qualities essential for any mother, she answered, her gaze unwavering. The second social worker shuffled through some papers. It says here you live alone and work full-time. Who looks after the baby during the day? Donna Lucia, my neighbor, watches him while I work. We have a community support system, Ana explained, feeling her blood boil at their attempt to disqualify her. Many single mothers work and raise their children with dignity. Across town, Pedro Silva parked his patrol car in front of Donna Lucia's house. He carried a folder with internal department documents, altered reports, specific orders to target suspicious elements in certain neighborhoods, and the circular that deliberately ignored the municipal law on the use of K9s. Lucia opened the door with the baby in her arms, her old eyes widening in surprise at the uniform. I'm here to help, Pedro said, his voice tense. This never should have happened to Ana. Rafael Almeida arrived minutes later, recorder in hand. The journalist examined the documents with professional focus as Lucia made hibiscus tea. This is proof of profiling, Rafael stated, photographing the pages. The dogs were released despite the clear presence of a child, which is a direct violation of protocol. Pedro ran a hand over his weary face. My superior said it was just another routine call, but I felt something was wrong from the start. Back at the station, Ana faced another prejudiced question. How does a person with your temperament handle a crying baby? The ex-soldier smiled for the first time. With the same control I am demonstrating right now, while facing questions that challenge my motherhood based solely on the color of my skin. The silence that followed was broken by one of the social workers' phones. The news was spreading. Residents were gathering in front of the station. They held signs. Donna Lucia had mobilized mothers, fathers, and grandparents from the community. Rafael was streaming everything live, while Pedro, still in uniform, stood with the group, an unexpected symbol of change. The solidarity was growing like a wave that could not be stopped. Sofia Oliveira walked into her classroom with her head down, still feeling the sting of the cruel words she had heard during recess. The 12-year-old had defended Ana Costa during a heated argument among her classmates about the video circulating online. My grandmother knows her. Ana's not dangerous. You're all being unfair, Sofia had protested, only to be met with jeers and nasty comments. So your grandma defends criminals now? Must run in the family, sneered Mateus, the police chief's son, as the other boys laughed. During history class, the teacher asked them to discuss recent examples of citizenship. Sofia raised a trembling hand and brought up Ana's case, but the teacher cut her off. Let's stick to less controversial examples, Sofia. When she got home, the girl collapsed into Donna Lucia's arms, sobbing. The old woman's blood boiled as she listened to her granddaughter's story. It wasn't enough that Ana was unjustly imprisoned. Now Sophia was suffering for defending what was right. "This ends today," the old woman muttered, picking up her cell phone. Meanwhile, at the precinct, Captain Mariana stared at the folder on her desk. It contained the testimony she was scheduled to give at the preliminary hearing. It was a carefully crafted statement, designed to omit Ana's military past and her expertise with the K9s. "Captain, got a minute?" Pedro Silva stood at the open door, his expression serious. Mariana gestured for him to come in. The police officer closed the door behind him. "I know they're going to ask you to lie tomorrow," he said, cutting straight to the point. "To say that Ana resisted arrest, that the dogs were released according to standard protocol." "Those are orders, Silva," the captain replied without meeting his gaze. "I have copies of the military files," Pedro revealed, the words freezing Mariana in her tracks. "I know Ana trained those very same dogs. I know you two served together." The officer stood up, her face pale. "Are you threatening me, officer?" "I'm choosing the right side this time," he answered. "If you don't tell the truth, I will." At Dona Lucia's house, a dozen women had already gathered in the living room. Mothers, grandmothers, teachers, all united by a shared indignation. The old woman served coffee as they organized a silent demonstration in front of the police station for the following day. "Our children are learning to hate," Lucia said, stroking Sophia's hair. "And that is more dangerous than any police dog." The little girl smiled for the first time that day, observing the women who, like determined ants, were beginning to move the foundations of an entire city. In the early hours of the third day, Rafael Almeida couldn't sleep. The journalist had spent hours scouring through leaked military files when he found something extraordinary. In a video dated 7 years prior, a familiar figure emerged from the chaos of a conflict zone in the Middle East. It was Ana Costa, younger, in military uniform, commanding a group of war dogs in a rescue operation. The video's audio clearly captured Ana whispering commands in Yue as the animals formed a protective cordon around trapped civilians. With breathtaking precision, she guided the dogs through rubble and danger zones, saving dozens of people. Raphael watched the footage 5 times in a row, in disbelief at the skill of the woman now facing such absurd accusations. In the morning, the journalist sent the file to Dona Lucia, who organized an impromptu screening in the central square. Residents gathered around a large screen, watching, mouths agape, the irrefutable proof of Ana's expertise. Women wept as they saw the very person the police had treated as a criminal risking her own life to save strangers. "She isn't just a dog trainer," Raphael explained to the crowd. "Ana Costa received a Medal of Honor for saving 32 people in that operation. The same methods she used to calm the dogs here were the ones that saved lives over there." The video spread like wildfire. Within hours, it reached the phones of officials, politicians, and inevitably, the screen of Captain Mariana Santos. Sitting alone in her office at the barracks, the military officer watched the recording with a knot tightening in her stomach. On that mission, she had been in overall command, but it was Ana who had executed the impossible rescue. Mariana had never mentioned her subordinate's name in the official reports, subtly appropriating the credit. Now, watching her past exposed, the captain stared at her reflection in the darkened screen. What was left of her integrity? The commendations on her wall suddenly felt as if they weighed a ton. Every medal, every piece of praise in her career was cast in Ana's shadow, the woman she had allowed to be humiliated on the city streets. In court, the public defender assigned to Ana requested the video be admitted as evidence. The judge, visibly impressed, could not ignore it. The public, once divided, now demanded justice in unison. Posters with stills from the video appeared in house windows, and even police officers began to question the treatment of the former soldier. Ana, alone in her cell, did not yet know that her heroic past had become her greatest defense in the present. The sun had barely risen when the women began to gather. Ana Costa stood at the center of the group, her baby nestled against her chest, as Donna Lucia organized the others. There were 27 mothers in all, dressed in white, each with a story of pain and resilience etched on her face. No shouting, no violence, Ana instructed, adjusting her son in her arms. Our strength is in our silence. The women positioned themselves in front of the police station, forming an impeccable line. Each held a poster with a photo of her child and simple, powerful phrases. My son deserves respect. Motherhood is not a crime. Justice for all mothers. Anna's poster showed only her sleeping baby, with the word future written in red letters. The officers on duty watched uncomfortably through the windows. Pedro Silva, arriving for his shift, stopped a few yards away, unable to look away from the scene. He recognized in Anna's face the same determination he had seen on that rainy night. There was no fear, only purpose. News of the demonstration spread quickly through the city. Residents arrived in small groups, some bringing water and food for the protesters, others observing with suspicion. An old man spat on the ground as he passed, muttering insults. A young student handed out flowers to the mothers. They're going to cause trouble for all of us, a shopkeeper commented to his neighbor. The police protect us. Who will defend us if we start questioning everything? And who protects these women? A passing teacher retorted. You saw the video. That could have been a tragedy. Rafael Almeida moved between the groups, recording testimonies and documenting the growing rift in the community. The journalist noted how the silent protest was more impactful than any shouted slogan. At noon, Captain Mariana Santos arrived at the station. Her eyes met Ana's for a brief moment, heavy with unspoken meaning. The officer quickly entered the building, but the tension between them lingered in the air like static electricity. In the afternoon, 3 more mothers joined the protest, including an off-duty police officer. The gesture caused a stir among her colleagues, but no one dared to intervene. The demonstration continued in its disciplined silence, a constant reminder that something had to change. As the sun began to set, Ana looked at the women by her side and felt, for the first time in a long time, that she was not alone. The city might be divided, but right there, in that moment, something new had been born. A seed of hope, planted in the hard asphalt of indifference. In the police station's kennel, Alpha remained motionless, ignoring the repeated commands of the substitute handler. The dog, once the star of the K9 program, now refused to perform even the most basic commands. Other officers tried to take control, offering treats and using standard techniques, but the response was always the same, her eyes fixed on the door, as if waiting for someone. This is the 3rd time this week, one of the officers commented, visibly frustrated. Ever since the incident with Ana Costa, she just won't respond to anyone. The issue quickly became a crisis for the department. It wasn't just Alpha. Other dogs in the squad were demonstrating erratic behavior, as if the bond with their handlers had been severed. The chief called an emergency meeting, demanding an explanation from Captain Mariana Santos. In the conference room, Mariana faced the tense expressions of her superiors. Her stomach churned as she arranged documents on the table. For the first time in her 15-year career, She felt the crushing weight of the truth she had buried. The K9 program is falling apart, the superintendent declared. We need to understand what that woman did to our dogs. Mariana took a deep breath. The words that followed cost her every ounce of her courage. Ana Costa didn't do anything to the dogs. In fact, the entire program was built on the methods she developed in the army. A stunned silence fell over the room. The confession landed like a bomb. Glances of shock and disapproval were exchanged. Pedro Silva, also present, watched with a mixture of surprise and respect for the captain's belated courage. Ana Costa is not a threat to the system, Mariana concluded, looking at each person in the room. She is the creator of the system we pride ourselves on using, and Alpha isn't broken. She simply recognizes her true leader. At the end of the meeting, the superintendent ordered an internal investigation into the matter. As the officers dispersed, Pedro approached Mariana. That was brave, he said quietly. It was late, she replied, gathering her papers. 15 years too late. That night, the K9 department faced an uncomfortable truth. Their dogs, trained for blind obedience to authority, had instead chosen loyalty to justice. The hearing room was packed when Ana Costa entered. Her steady footsteps echoed on the wooden floor as she walked to the center, under gazes that mixed curiosity, support, and distrust. She sat in the designated chair, adjusted the microphone, and for the first time since the incident, allowed her voice to be heard by the entire city. I served this country on 3 international tours, she began, her calm voice a stark contrast to the tension in the room. I trained the very dogs that were set upon me and my son. Dogs that have saved lives in operations you will never even know existed. The audience was silent. In the front row, Donna Lucia held Ana's baby, rocking him gently. Rafael Almeida, notepad in hand, recorded every word. At the back, Pedro watched intently, his crisp uniform concealing the internal conflict that consumed him. When I returned, I discovered that to this city, I wasn't a veteran. I was just a black woman with a baby in her arms. Ana continued, her voice gaining strength. The same system that trained me to protect lives saw me as a threat when I was simply walking home. The former soldier recounted the trauma of conflict zones, the sleepless nights, the institutional abandonment upon her return. She spoke of how she had learned Iwe from a Nigerian nurse during her deployment, and how that language had become her secret refuge. When the dogs charged, she said, I wasn't afraid for myself. I was afraid for my son, born into a place where his mother is seen as a target before she is seen as a human being. At that moment, a commotion erupted at the back of the room. Alpha, the lead K9, had slipped away from the officer holding her. The animal trotted down the central aisle, causing gasps of panic. Captain Mariana shot to her feet, trying to intercept the dog, but Alpha did not attack. With deliberate steps, she approached Ana, sniffed the air, and in a gesture that silenced the entire room, lay down at her feet, head bowed in a sign of submission and loyalty. Ana reached out a hand, gently touching the animal's head. This is true training, she spoke into the microphone. It is not about domination. It is about trust and respect. Dozens of cell phones captured the moment. A teenager near the window was streaming it live. The image of the black woman with the police dog at her feet instantly became a powerful symbol. I am not here asking for favors, she concluded, looking directly at the authorities. I am demanding the right to exist without having to prove my worth on every street corner in this city. When she finished, the silence was broken by applause that started softly and grew into a deafening roar. The video of her testimony, especially the moment with Alpha, began to spread across the country like wildfire. The municipal auditorium, decorated with the nation's colors and portraits of the city's founders, was packed. Ana Costa remained silent as the city council president announced the beginning of the public hearing. She smoothed the simple clothes she had chosen for the moment, feeling the weight of every gaze upon her. This city celebrates Founders' Day every year, as if our history began only with them. Ana began, her firm voice echoing through the microphone. But where are the black people who built these streets? Where are the women who held entire families together while being rendered invisible? Murmurs rippled through the audience. Donna Lucia, sitting in the front row, nodded in support, her eyes welling with tears. The former soldier continued, explaining how her experience was not an isolated one, but part of a systemic pattern the city insisted on ignoring. When they set those dogs on me and my son, it wasn't an incident. It was the result of a city that chose to forget a part of its own history, she declared, looking directly at the council members. Rafael Almeida, standing near the entrance, recorded every word. The journalist could see the impact of her statements on the faces in the crowd. Some looked ashamed, others indignant. Many were moved. I demand not only justice for myself, but recognition for everyone who has been erased from this narrative, Ana asserted, her voice rising in strength. Our children deserve to grow up knowing they belong to this land as much as anyone else. Pedro Silva watched from the back of the room, uncomfortable in his uniform. The officer felt the weight of responsibility in every word Ana spoke. When she finished her testimony, the silence was broken by applause that started tentatively and grew in intensity. But just as quickly, voices of protest rose to meet it. A man in a suit stood up, pointing a finger. She wants to divide our city. We are being attacked by ideologies that don't respect our traditions. Other conservatives joined the chorus, while Ana's supporters responded with equal fervor. Security had to intervene to calm the escalating tensions. As she left the auditorium, Ana walked between two human currents. On one side, people were applauding and offering her flowers. On the other, faces were twisted in disapproval, some shouting hateful words. The mother walked on, head held high, feeling each step as part of a journey far greater than herself. You have opened a door that can never be closed again, Donna Lucia whispered, holding her arm firmly. Ana took a deep breath, feeling the weight and, paradoxically, the liberation that came with the fight. The truth had been spoken, and now the city would have to decide what to do with it. The rain returned that night, falling in heavy drops that washed the streets and seemed to cleanse the tensions of the last few days. Ana Costa watched the dark sky from her porch, cradling her son who slept peacefully in her arms, wrapped in a soft cotton blanket. The rhythm of the drops on the roof brought a strange sense of peace. Donna Lucia Oliveira emerged from her house carrying a tray with 3 steaming mugs of hibiscus and cornmeal tea. The old woman smiled at the sight of mother and child, approaching with slow but steady steps. Without a word, she set the tray on a small wooden table and sat beside Ana, enveloping her in a hug that spoke more than any speech ever could. The water cleanses everything, my child, the old woman whispered, stroking the young mother's hair. It carries away what no longer serves us. Across the street, the silhouettes of women moved discreetly. The Mothers Collective maintained their protective vigil, taking turns in shifts to ensure nothing disturbed the tranquility of the house. Some held umbrellas, Others simply let the rain wet their determined faces. A vehicle parked a few yards away. Pedro Silva got out hesitantly, his uniform replaced by civilian clothes. He crossed the street under the suspicious gaze of the women who formed an invisible cordon of protection. The police officer stopped at the foot of the stairs, rain streaming down his face. "May I come up?" he asked, his voice nearly swallowed by the sound of the downpour. Ana nodded. Lucia watched him with attentive eyes as he climbed the steps and stopped at a respectful distance. "I came to apologize," Pedro began, "and to offer my help. I want to learn about ethics in the handling of dogs, about respect. I want to understand what you know and what I was never taught." The baby stirred in his mother's arms, and she adjusted him with a gentle movement. The ex-soldier studied the man's face for a long moment before answering. "It won't be easy." "I know," he replied, "but I have to try." Donna Lucia poured a mug of tea and offered it to the unexpected visitor. The simple gesture sealed the beginning of something new. Not exactly a friendship, but a possible path to redemption. The official communiqué arrived late the next afternoon. By order of the Court of Justice, the use of K9 units in police approaches is suspended indefinitely pending the conclusion of the investigation. Ana Costa held the paper in her trembling hands, while Rafael Almeida, beside her, smiled discreetly. The news was an undeniable victory, yet the ex-soldier's expression remained grave. "We did it, Ana," the journalist said, putting away his recording device. "Your story is going to change protocols all over the country." She merely nodded, her eyes fixed on her son, who was sleeping in Donna Lucia's lap. The victory had a bittersweet taste. Ever since the video went viral, her house had been under constant watch by onlookers. Some brought flowers and signs of support. Others, only judgmental stares. Privacy, something Ana had always valued, was now a distant luxury. As she left the courthouse, Pedro Silva appeared, still in uniform, but with a different demeanor from the officer who had unleashed the dogs weeks ago. "Can I speak with you for a minute?" he asked. Ana handed the document to Rafael and followed the officer to a more private corner. Pedro explained he had requested a transfer to the administrative sector. He couldn't work with the K9 teams anymore. "We're organizing a training course on humanized approaches. Captain Mariana suggested your name as a consultant." A dry laugh escaped Ana's lips. "Mariana, finally acknowledging my work." Returning home that evening, Ana found her street transformed. Neighbors had organized a community watch. Tables were set up on the sidewalks. Children played under collective supervision, and adults conversed in low voices, creating a human barrier against any threat. Donna Lucia met her, handing her the baby and a warm cup of tea. "No one will bother you tonight," the old woman assured her. "We've organized a rotation. Each family will keep an eye out for 2 hours." Ana felt a lump in her throat. For years, she had fought alone, first in the army, then as a civilian. Loneliness had been her most constant companion. Now, looking around, she saw faces willing to protect her, ordinary people who had found in her resistance the courage for their own struggles. Alpha, who now officially lived with Ana by court order, lay down at her feet as she sat on the porch. The dog, once a symbol of a system that had nearly destroyed her, was now part of her protection. Maybe this is how justice is built, Ana thought, rocking her son. Not alone but together, vigilant, one protecting the other. The sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days, casting golden rays over the still damp city. In Donna Lucia's backyard, the air carried the weight of recent events, but also the promise of healing. The old woman carefully arranged ceramic mugs on a worn wooden table, her wrinkled hands moving with practiced grace. "The tea is ready," she announced, mixing hibiscus and cornmeal in the exact proportions she had learned from her own grandmother. "This is a time for healing, not just our bodies, but our souls." Slowly, the yard filled with people. First came the women from the collective, each bringing something to share: bread, cakes, stories. Pedro Silva appeared timidly at the gate, but Ana gave him a welcoming nod, and the officer entered, carrying an envelope with documents that could help other women in similar situations. "I never thought I would be here," he confessed, accepting a mug of the red tea. "But I've learned that a uniform can't be allowed to blind you." Rafael Almeida arrived with his notebook, no longer as a journalist, but as a friend. He watched as the simple yard transformed into a space of reconciliation and resilience. As Ana served the tea, she realized something was shifting in the city, in the conversations, in the gazes, in the way people now questioned traditions once held sacred. Her son slept soundly in a makeshift cradle in the shade, protected by watchful and loving eyes. "This city will never be the same," Donna Lucia remarked, observing the diverse group gathered in her yard. "And that is a good thing." In the quiet of her home that night, Ana sat in the rocking chair, the same one where Donna Lucia served tea on Sunday afternoons. The baby's soft breathing was a stark contrast to the memory of sirens that still echoed in her mind. On the kitchen table, newspaper clippings lay like silent witnesses, their headlines speaking of revised police protocols and a hearing that had changed a city's perception. It wasn't a complete victory. Ana knew the deep structures of power rarely change with a single battle. But it was a start. Captain Mariana had called, her voice heavy with guilt, but edged with a new determination. She was finally beginning to understand that institutional loyalty without ethics was merely complicity in disguise. The Mothers Collective would meet again tomorrow, not just to protest, but to build. They had discovered a strength in their unity that individually none of them had believed they possessed. Ana's journey had not brought perfect peace. Prejudice doesn't vanish with one hearing or a viral video, but it had forged a path toward justice, not only for her, but for all the women who would come after. Cradled by the gentle creak of the chair, with her son safe in her arms and a community at her back, Ana finally understood. Her silence had never been weakness. It had been the most powerful roar in a society that only learns to listen when a woman refuses to be invisible. And now, that roar would echo for generations.